Are you looking to up your real estate investing game? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Sub2deals Show with your host, Sub2 expert William Tingle.
Hey Sub2ers, this is William Tingle of Sub2deals.com. Today our topic is the due on sale clause. What is the due on sale? Well, if you're an investor that's been investing using the Sub2 method for a while, you've certainly heard about it. If you've just recently started looking into buying subject to, you've probably already heard about it. It is literally the big scary thing that gets most people concerned about. Can they really go out and take over payments on mortgages? Some people will tell you it's illegal to take over mortgages because of the due on sale clause. So after getting so many questions about it for such a length of time, I decided this might be a good time to just go ahead and talk a little bit about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. I'll give you a couple of case study examples that I have had sent to me recently by people who say that they've had experience with it. And then we're actually going to get on the phone and talk with a gentleman who said he actually had a loan call due, and he'll tell us all about it, how it happened, and what he thinks probably caused it. So to get going, what is a due on sale clause? Well, a due on sale clause is simply a provision in a mortgage document that gives the lender the right to demand payment of the remaining balance of the loan when a property's sold, when title's transferred or beneficial interest in a title is transferred. They have the right to say, hey, pay us up. The rest of it that's owed, we want it now. Now, this is a contractual right, not a law. And this means that if title of the property is transferred, the bank may or may not, at its option, decide to call the loan due. Now, don't confuse a contract clause with law, okay? There's no due on sale jail. There's no due on sale police. No one is going to issue a warrant for your arrest if you do it. It is simply something in the contract, an agreement, in this case between the lender and the borrower, that says, hey, if you transfer ownership of this property without our approval, we can call the loan due. And, you know, I heard a lot about it when I first got started, and like any investor, pursuing something new, I said, well, that sounds like something that could be a problem. Let me just read a due on sale clause. If you have a mortgage on your home, go get your mortgage paperwork, deed of trust out, and read it. Typically, the due on sale is going to be paragraph 17 in your mortgage, and it literally says that upon transfer of title or beneficial interest in the property, the lender has the right at their option, okay? And I mean, they're literally telling you that they may or may not, okay? They have the right at their option to call the loan due. Now, before 1982, virtually every mortgage out there was freely assumable. And back during the late 70s, early 80s, people were assuming loans instead of going out and getting new ones. Because if you were around back during that time, you know that the interest rates got really high. I think at one time prime was over 20%. A new mortgage was very expensive. And there were a lot of lower interest rate mortgages that you could just take over the payments on. And the bank says, well, hey, what can we do to stop this? So on new mortgages that they were writing, they would put in a due on sale clause and also make them not freely assumable without the bank's approval. Before this happened, most people could just pay a fee, and it was typically under $100, and just take over the payments, kind of like what we do today, but with subject to, but we don't formally assume those. Okay. Now remember, lenders aren't required to add due on sale clauses, but virtually all of them do. All FHA loans before December of 1989 were freely assumable, and all VA loans before February of 1988 were freely assumable. So how does this really impact investors? Well, if you're a wholesaler or rehabber, typically it's not going to. The main people it's going to affect are people that are taking over payments subject to. And how will it affect you? Well, it will affect you, of course, if the loan gets called due, because they'll send you a notice that says, hey, you have to pay us up in full, and give you a certain amount of time to take care of that. Now, I've got to tell you, I bought my first subject to property in 1990. And since then, I've bought over 400. I've bought from small banks, large banks, regional banks, local banks. When I do a multi-day training, I've actually brought in uh, uh, officers from small banks and regionals to talk to the students in the room, and they've all pretty much said the same thing. Banks really don't care who makes the payments as long as someone does. But what if you've been around me for any period of time, or listened to any of the things I teach, you know that we use a land trust to take title of the property, and that's really how we do it. Now, some people teach that that's a way to avoid the due on sale clause. What you need to understand is if you use a land trust to take title to property, and you get the beneficial interest to that property, which of course you will, that's your ownership, you have violated the due on sale clause. The due on sale clause is very specific that transfer of title or beneficial interest. So you're still violating it. Now, will it be a problem? Like I said, we've bought over 400 and never, ever heard a word from anybody. Now, I put out the word when I plan to do this on the topic of due on sale. I posted on Facebook and all the groups and on my Twitter account and just everywhere. And I said, listen, if anybody out there has had a problem with the due on sale clause, please let me know. I want someone that's got firsthand knowledge of it. I don't want to hear about friends of friends and that sort of thing. If you have firsthand knowledge, contact me and let's talk about it. And I actually had 7 responses over the past few days, and I want to go over those with you, and we can kind of see a pattern here in the 7. The first one, and I'll leave names out here and some of the details that aren't very important, just for privacy purposes. The first person said, hey, a few years back, had a loan call due. The seller filed bankruptcy, and his attorney insisted on including it. They called the lender, pressed the issue, was forced to pay it off in full. Luckily, it was a reasonable amount. It's a very real possibility compared to what most gurus would say. Well, okay. So what we've got here is a case where a seller filed bankruptcy and his attorney insisted on including it in the bankruptcy. Okay. The second person that contacted me said it happened with Arvest Bank after a year, after he'd been making the payments for a year, and he thinks the big reason was the original sellers filed bankruptcy. Okay, so again, we have a case where the seller goes and files bankruptcy, and that causes a problem. I had a third person contact me that said they wanted to share their experience. They received a letter from one of their lenders. It was Flagstar Bank, calling out a deed transfer they had made. This was where this fella actually bought the property himself and transferred via quitclaim deed from his name into an LLC. And they call the loan due because he transferred it into his own LLC. And, I would probably have some argument with that. I think this was actually one that was sent to me that wasn't a first-person case. This was someone sharing from someone else, so I never really could talk to this person. That sounds a little bit unusual, and I'm always a little skeptical when I hear someone relay a story from third person or whatever the case may be, but not being able to talk to this person to verify. A lot of times I think there are some facts that probably would have made a difference. Certainly I can't, it's hard for me to understand why a bank, the guy really maintained ownership. He just transferred it to an entity that he owned, probably for some tax benefits or some, just some asset protection. The fourth person that contacted me said that he had a client that had someone take a property subject to, and then the seller called him 5 years later and said, "Hey, when are you going to pay this thing off?" And his client said, "When I feel like it." So the seller got a little ticked off at that and then called the lender. And of course, that created a problem. Something like this could be easily avoided. First of all, with making sure that your seller knows there are no guarantees on when this thing will be paid off. And I've talked to other investors who make promises to sellers and say, "We will absolutely have this done within 2 years, 3 years, whatever the case may be," because maybe the seller has some concerns and says, "Well, I'll want to buy a house in a couple of years and this thing will have to be paid off." And the investor, to get the deal, will promise to do that. And I always recommend not to do that, because what happens when you start making those promises and you start buying some houses is you look up a year, 2 years later, and you've made a lot of promises to a lot of people to pay houses off. And you're not in a position to be able to do that. And you look up one day and you've got a dozen houses that need to be paid off in the next 6 months. And your buyers that are in the house, or maybe you rented the house out and thought, well, things will be better, and they're not better. So what now? What do we do? So we've got a lot of angry sellers, and we risk the chance of running into a situation like this. The second problem that I see with this particular case is the response to the seller. "I'll pay it off when I feel like it." Uh, Common sense tells you that being a little bit more diplomatic and trying to handle that situation just a little bit better would have probably been the appropriate response, and probably wouldn't have gotten the the result from the seller that it did, contacting the bank and what have you. So obviously there were a couple of issues here. The seller most likely wasn't made very clear that there should have been no promise to pay off. And secondly, just the way you handle the seller when they call you. The next response, the fifth one, was someone that said that, again, this was a third person, said, I have never had one call due myself, but I am aware of someone who did, and I believe it was because the seller filed bankruptcy. And they were angry that the loan was still in their name, and so they included it, and that caused a problem. Again, we're seeing bankruptcy be an issue here. The next one was someone that said they had had 3 different clients receive questions, not loan accelerations, but questions from one particular lender, and this lender was Wells Fargo, about their Sub2 deals. And in every instance, insurance wasn't handled properly. Now, I've recommended an article that I wrote some time ago several times. You can find that at our website, sub2deals.com. Just go in there, go in the article section, do a search for insurance, and it'll pull it up. It's the first one, and it's a rather lengthy article, and it discusses a couple of different ways you can handle insurance. But in this case, apparently something was done wrong, and Wells Fargo was the particular one. Now, I have bought numerous houses where the lender was Wells Fargo, and I've never had an issue. But again, we have a specific way that we handle insurance, and if you have something that you're doing on a consistent basis correctly, your chances of having a problem are much, much less. The last example that I had from someone said that I had one called once because of insurance. They wanted the old owner's name on the policy. And so instead of messing around with it, I just paid it off. So was that something that he could have fixed and made the lender happy? Most likely. One of the things that we actually do now is go ahead and list our seller as an additional insured on every policy. I think that most lenders find that to be reassuring, just being able to see the name of the person on the mortgage, on the policy, and of course, if there were ever a claim that needed that signature, it'd be taken care of by the limited power of attorney that we get from our sellers when we purchase subject to. So that covers that. Again, from these 7 examples, you can see that the vast majority of the problems are caused from sellers filing bankruptcy and then again from insurance. So, and both of those things, certainly the insurance is very manageable. That's just something you need to know how to handle it properly, which is just I mean, and that's going to depend on how you're taking title. If you're taking title in your own name, if you're doing it with an LLC, if you're doing it with a trust, those things are going to make the insurance issue vary just a little bit, and that's a topic for another episode. Uh, but you need to have a way to handle your insurance that's consistent and that is accurate and it's going to keep you insured and also make the lender happy. And like I said, that's why we include our seller's name on that policy to do that. The other problem, bankruptcy, you certainly can't control what your seller does. But one of the things that I recommend in my course is that in the time that you're going to spend with a seller, and you're not going to spend much time with them. If you invest remotely, certainly you won't spend much time with them. If you're investing locally, you're going to sit down with a seller a time or two in the course of getting things done. And you can certainly get an idea about where the seller's heading, what's going on in their lives, and that sort of thing. We've had sellers file bankruptcy in the past after we had taken title to their house and bought the house, and it's happened within a few months, and we've had it happen years later. And in all of those cases, I guess they try to explain what's going on to either the trustee or to their attorney, and of course they don't really know how to explain it, so the attorney's called us, and we've explained what's been going on and told them we'd be happy to provide documentation, sales contract, the deed, proof of payments being made, that sort of thing. And we've just never had an issue. And I know I keep going back to that. Listen, we've never had an issue with these things, but we haven't. And I think that just goes back to handling it right from the very beginning. Okay? So, can it happen? Obviously it can. It has. I have to tell you, in almost 20 years, I had never had a verifiable case of a due on sale issue. And most of the long-term investors I know said the same thing. I was really rather surprised that I got 7 responses to this particular question. And I don't, like I said, a couple of them were third person. They were, not, I was not speaking directly to the person that had the issue. It was someone they knew or someone they had heard about. So even tossing those out, you're left with cases of where it's just insurance or bankruptcy that's going to be the problem. So handle your stuff right and you should be okay. I'm going to continue to do things just like I've been doing. It is definitely not something that should scare you off from a tactic that, subject to is a form of investing. It's just, I can't imagine anything better, to be perfectly honest with you. Taking over low interest rate loans and being able to do whatever you want with that house. If renting's your thing, do it. If you want to sell it with owner financing, do it. Lease options, go ahead. You own it. You can do whatever you like. So we're going to go ahead now and we're going to get on the phone with a gentleman who had a problem with the due on sale. He's going to tell us all about it, how it happened. He's going to tell us a little bit about the deal, and we'll find out exactly how it worked.
The Sub2deals Show with your host, Sub2 expert William Tingle. We'll be right back.
Okay, everybody, we're back, and I'm on the phone with a gentleman named Chip Chronister. He is out of Fort Smith, Arkansas. And he is actually going to talk to us about a deal that he had a due on sale issue with. Chip, let me let you go ahead and take it. Tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about the deal.
Okay, I'm Chip Chronister. Like you said, I live in a suburb of Fort Smith, Arkansas, called Lavaca. I am the vice president of our RIA group, which is called the River Valley Navigators. That's in our Arkansas group. I've been investing in houses very different ways, like Sub2. I build, I do lease options, just whatever I can do, wholesale, you name it, we do it. And what has happened on this due on sale clause is there was a medium to larger bank in our area that's growing very fast. And what happened is I went through there and I got the house under contract, got the deed like you're all supposed to. And then the way we did it, we put a buyer in our house and on a lease with an option for 1 year. And then at the end of the year, they could turn around and turn it into a owner finance deal. Well, about at the same time that the 1 year coming mark, I started getting a letter saying, your typical nasty letter, how you're going to be called, due on sale, we need this. Well, after about 3 or 4 of them, they kept getting, very more aggressive to call this number. I went ahead and called the number, and I got a hold of this bank, and, they told me they were going to call the due on sale, and they just want all their money by, within the month or so. And there was the main reason I think this thing got called was because the couple who sold me the house filed bankruptcy. And I also just put the thing in my business name. So therefore, it was shown a transfer of title. So, but I've had some other people say, man, you should have put it in a trust. Well, if that would have been the case, I could have put it in like Jones Family Trust or whatever their last name was. But everybody tells me the St. Main Act would have saved it. But even with the St. Main Act, anytime things change with the transfer of title, that would have really avoided it if they'd really looked at it. But at the same time, I told the bank, said, hey, this note was over $2,000 behind. I've come up to this, got you a performing note. And I've also made your payments for a year consecutively. So now you're just basically going to kick me out on the street. It's going to cost you probably between $15,000 and $20,000 to get everything current, foreclose it right, and then you're going to take a loss on your sale. I said, are you guys willing to do that? And the woman at this bank said, we are. But we might be able to work something out. Have your lawyer call me back tomorrow at a certain time, and maybe we can work out what's called a contract for deed. We have that in Arkansas. And so my lawyer called him back the next day, and he said it was like a 5 to 10 minute conversation, and they basically said no on everything, either bring us some money or they was going to start foreclosing on us. So the bank called me back the next day or two, and they politely asked me, said, hey, will you go ahead and sign us over a quick claim deed so we can get this all done? And I thought, man, the way you guys treated me and wanted their money, I told them no. And after that, I never heard from them again. And about a year later, we did a financial audit, and I noticed this bank actually took an ACH out of my account in February, and it turned out they did it again in June on that house a year after it happened. And then so I started looking up who actually lived back in the house, and I contacted one of the bank vice presidents, and they said, oh, yeah, the people that you sold it to you, they're still there. And sure enough, they're still there today. So I thought that was kind of pretty funny how all that happened. And that's pretty much the story right there.
So the final outcome, so from what you're saying is you bought this house, you took it subject to, these people moved out, you took possession, you put your own tenant in, you brought the home current, you made your payments for a year, and then you got a letter after a year had passed. You ignored the first several letters, and then you finally called them. How much time do you think transpired between the time of your initial letter and the time that you actually contacted them and spoke with them about it?
Probably about 2 months, because they were real aggressive. All my other friends would tell me they would get a letter from, say, like a Wells Fargo or something like that, and they just basically throw it in the trash, and they might not get another one, a year or two later. But this one, they just kept mailing it, and it was going to happen, This same bank also, the secretary of our RIA, he just took and changed the name from his personal name to his company name. And they told him, since they changed the name and title, they was either going to call the due on sale on him, or he'd have to go back and rechange it. And so he did. So that's how aggressive this bank is.
So it sounds like what you've got here, you've got a bank that is really somebody to be on the lookout for, and is really very unreasonable.
Yes.
To deal with. Yeah. Okay. So start to finish on this, you had it for a year. What do you think happened in the year? You said you think your sellers filed bankruptcy, and that was the issue. That's what really kicked it off.
Because I even called the sellers, and they said, "Oh, we told the banker not to put the house in it, but he did put the house in it."
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But they're still living there today.
Right, and they're still living there. Okay. So the house was never really foreclosed on. It sounds like I didn't really understand the finality to it. You had your lawyer call, they wouldn't agree to anything. How did you change title back to whoever, and who did you give it back to?
I don't know how they changed title, because they was wanting me to sign a quick claim deed back to them, and I told them no. And I never heard anything else from them after that. And
Well,
somehow they put it back in their name.
well, let me ask you this, Chip. Have you checked title? Are you still the owner of the house?
By the tax records, I'm not the owner of the house.
Okay, now I'm not talking about the tax records, though. I'm talking about on the actual. I mean, if you had a valid deed, you had to sign away. I mean, you had to be the grantor somewhere along the line for the previous owners to get ownership back, or the bank to take ownership, and you never did that.
No, I did not, because I've looked at my tax records and had, they had their name, then my company name, and then went back to their name. And I don't know how, because I never signed a quick claim deed or nothing.
Wow, that is strange. I don't understand how in the world. I would want to see that deed that transferred ownership if I were you. How long ago did this happen?
About 3 years ago.
About 3 years ago. I would be looking at. Do you have deed records online where you are?
No, but they're pretty easy to get once I go to the courthouse.
Oh, okay. You have to go to the courthouse. I was just going to say, we get off the phone, I would be right online looking that up. That is amazing. I would really want to know how that happened. But there was no foreclosure. The seller moved back into the house. The bank seemed satisfied, and that's the last you've heard of it. You did say they took 2 payments out of your bank account, though, since then.
Yeah, I got the money back, though. Once I called the bank, the guy, he's a vice president. He's like, he didn't know how it happened either, but it was like a year later. And then it was in February, and then in June, it's like it wasn't consecutive. It's just like, because we was trying to figure out how we know how much our payments on all our other properties were, but it's like that's an oddball number. And then we started doing some research. It's like, hey, that's how much that house on Kendall Avenue cost us, and that's what it was. And we called the bank, and they said, yeah, it's going in the Kendall Avenue account.
Okay. All right. So you've been investing. How many years have you been an investor?
Since about 2008.
Okay. So you've been doing this for 11 years, and you've bought several houses Sub2, have you not?
Yes.
Okay. And you've bought Sub2 since. So this isn't something that you felt like is a widespread problem that's going to continue to cause problems for you. The other ones that you've bought, have you ever heard anything from the banks, or are things just rocking along normally? Or?
Well, that's the only due on sale clause I got. But like one time, for example, a funny story was back when the Bruce Jenner stuff was all going on, I bought a house. Her name was Christy. And the guy on the other line goes, is this Christy? I said, no, this is Chris. You know how things are going in the world? And he's like, oh, I do. And then he just gave me everything I wanted to know. But
okay.
So, and I always get like the person's social security number. You'll always need I always get a power of attorney, just your typical stuff like that. Mother's maiden name is key. And once you get a few things like that, they'll always give you all the information.
Right. Okay. All right. And like I said, that hasn't deterred you from taking deeds going forward. You're still continuing to buy in this manner. You're just, if someone calls you up with the same bank, you would think twice about that maybe.
I probably would. And I had another investor friend of mine. He lives in Pennsylvania, and he was going to take one with the same bank. We talked about it. He's like, I don't know. So I think when it turned out, the guy flaked out on him anyways, but I think they was going to pass on it, to be honest with you. Yeah. Just because of that particular bank.
Okay. So looking back on this particular one, saying that your seller filed bankruptcy, and you think that's kind of what tipped them off to what happened. I'm assuming that when you bought, you went ahead, you changed the insurance, you did all those things, and never a problem from that end. It was strictly the bankruptcy.
That's correct.
Okay. Did you, if thinking back to when you talked to your sellers, did they indicate to you that was their intent at that time, or to file bankruptcy? I mean, they had obviously some other financial problems. Do you think if you'd known ahead of time or something that?
Well, they told me they were going to file bankruptcy, but they were going to leave the house out of it.
Right.
But then the attorney, because the guy even showed me the bankruptcy papers. Right. Because he was that clear with me, and he said, I told the attorney not to put the house in it. But you know how attorneys are; they do whatever they want to most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he went ahead and put the house in it, and I guess that's what triggered the due on sale clause.
Right. Okay. So the final outcome from the thing is the sellers are back in the house. They're listed as the owners of record, and you're out of it. No foreclosure happened. Did you ever? I mean, have you spoken to anyone about getting the money back? I mean, what happened with the tenants? You had placed tenants in the house. What happened with that?
Yeah, what happened? They gave me $5,000 down, and I was just right up front and honest with them. As soon as this started going on, I told them, because they were the only people who has ever given me their intent in writing. Because in my contract it states, you got to give me a 30-day notice that if you're going to intend to buy or move out at the end of the year. Well, they actually gave me the notice in writing that they wanted to purchase the home owner financing. And this all hit at the same time. And as soon as I did, I told him what exactly was going on, and I was honest with him, and they was honest with me. And, I had a good enough spread. Basically, I made all my money back. But the $5,000 down he gave to me, I just thought, well, I had to kick him out. He asked, do we need to find a new place to live? And I said, yeah, you do, because they're calling us due on sale clause. And he asked, do I get my down payment money down? I said, yeah, you do, because that's how I would want to be treated.
Right.
Because he didn't do anything wrong. So, and that also would have probably avoided a lawsuit of some kind.
Oh, yeah.
So I just gave him his $5,000 down. I took my monthly payments, and he was proud that I was honest with him. And I said, man, I'm sorry it turned out this way. And, everybody went on their way.
Well, good for you. That was certainly the right thing to do. And you're probably right. It was unfortunate. What was your potential profit on that deal if you'd owner financed for them, you think?
It was probably going to be about $18,000 to $20,000, I could made on it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it sounds like everything turned out okay. Incredibly with the tenant and everything, but I'll tell you that I am so curious about that deed. I would want to see who signed a deed giving the former owners the property back. That would be very interesting how that was handled. I would think on your part that you would probably be able to take some kind of action against this bank, depending on who signed that deed. That's I would really want to follow up with you on that one. But anyway, man, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come talk to us about this. I've bought hundreds, and I've never heard a peep out of anybody. And it was funny. I've asked on several occasions before, and I know you had talked to me before. Most of the people I actually got several people that responded to my request about the due on sale. And 3 or 4 of them really sound legit and valid. The other ones there's a couple that are a little bit questionable, but nobody else would come on and talk with me about it. So I sure do appreciate you doing that.
I appreciate the good content you guys put out for everybody.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We certainly try. We just try to tell it like it is. I mean, if the due on sale is there, it is something you need to be aware of, and and act appropriately and accordingly. It's you do need to consider it in your deal. So,
William, one time this is from the same bank I got another property finance with, and I was one day after all this happened, I just started looking through this old bank paperwork and of a different property, and it said the due on sale clause could be called, and that this property I bought could not be rented out. It's a single family house. Well, what blew me away about the whole deal is they're charging me, commercial rates. And like every 3 years, it's got to be refinanced. I'm thinking, you guys know that I'm not living here, but yet you charge me a commercial rate. You tell me I can't use this thing as a rent house, and you have a due on sale clause. So basically, that document is written so whenever they want the money, they can just say, hey, we want your money right now. So.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds almost like some of those smaller banks that were the predatory lender type stuff. Yeah, it sounds like borderline in that sort of way.
But I'm sure this bank's got over 100 plus branches. Is what's scary,
Yeah, I have heard of them in the past, but I don't think. I mean, you say they're growing; they must be in your area, so maybe they're.
Oh, they're all through the South.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Chip. Well, thanks so much. Like I said, I appreciate you sharing. It's going to help, undoubtedly help a lot of people. And but keep getting those deeds, man. Just don't buy from that bank.
I agree with you on that.
Okay, man. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hey guys, so there you have it. Due on sale issues. Um, uh, Experience there with Chip was a little bit unusual, but we did want to share that with you. My recommendations for subject to and due on sale avoidance problems with it is number one, handle your insurance properly. Okay, you need to make sure if you're using a trust, your trustee is your primary loss payee. Make sure that the mortgagee is placed in the proper spot on the insurance policy. Make sure that your beneficial interest, if you use a trust, is also named as their interest may appear. Something we do to sort of give the lender the warm fuzzies when they get that new deck page for that policy. We will also name our seller as an additional insured. And if there are ever any issues regarding something that need a signature from the seller, we take care of that with our limited power of attorney that we also get. Understand how subject to works. Don't be afraid to pick up a course, okay? They're a few $100. They'll teach you how to do this stuff properly. And yes, I offer one, but there are other people out there that offer good material as well. So whoever your teacher is, if they know what they're doing, you're going to be in good shape. People will spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on a college degree that they'll never use, never get a job in that field, but they have a problem with dropping $500 on a course that will absolutely change your life. So don't be one of those people. Handle your insurance properly. Kind of know where your sellers are going. Are they going to file bankruptcy? Is that their intent? You can kind of plan for that, maybe steer them in the direction they need to go. Tell them if they do decide to file, to have their attorney contact you. You can explain what happened. Maybe that'll make the difference in the house being included in the bankruptcy. We've had people file bankruptcy after they sold to us without issues. Why? Because we deal with it up front. Okay? Treat your sellers fairly. We heard of an instance where seller called back several years after the fact and asked, when are you going to pay this house off? And instead of handling it diplomatically, the investor says, when I feel like paying it off. Okay? Just don't be that way with your sellers. Listen, they got things they want to do. Try to work with them, but remember, you explain to them on numerous occasions during the buying process. No guarantees. And then there are certain banks that may be triggers. Chip didn't really want to name the bank in our discussion because I believe he still does some business with them. And, he doesn't want to have to worry about repercussions. If you want to know the name of the bank, contact me and I'll share it with you. You can email me at william@sub2deals.com or on any of the Facebook news groups that we've got. And I'll be glad to share that information. They are a small bank, but he says they're growing. So, it could be a problem down the road. I don't know. But that's it for this time. If you guys have any questions regarding this, please send them to me. I'll help you in any way I can. And but as Chip said, don't let the due on sale be a problem for you or make you feel like this isn't something you can do. It is a very, very, very rare occurrence. And again, you can mitigate and even prevent it from being a problem for you. So get out there and buy some houses.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Sub2deals Show with William Tingle. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And for more great content and to stay up to date, visit Sub2deals.com, on Facebook at Sub2deals. We'll catch you next time.